All right. Okay, we got that. All right. It is 6:30. Helen, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, just checking there. We got Sarah back. Everybody's back here. So as soon as, let's, we can get that up. We have it up. At least it's up here. It's not on Zoom. Let's get the agenda up on Zoom so everybody can see it. See some other people out there, and then we'll start.
See it if you're not blind.
We can see it in the room, but the people that are online can't see it.
Can't see it.
Gosh.
I didn't hear about Betsy's absence. She's on vacation or?
She was a maybe. She was gonna try to make it because she was traveling, but she wasn't sure she was gonna make it. There we go.
Safe travels for her.
Sarah is sharing a screen. There we go. Okay. Welcome, everybody. We're gonna call this meeting of the Conservation District Board of Supervisors to order for the 29th of August. We're recording this for posterity's sake and historical record. Also for the record, we do have 4 or 5 supervisors here tonight, Doug Rushton and I, TJ Johnson in the room. We have Helen Wheatley and David Ayal out there in the other world. Executive Director Sarah Moorhead's with us. And we've also got Ben Cushman, our legal counsel here, and of course Sophia's in the room here with us too. And then a few other people who get their turn, 15 minutes of fame a little bit later. I see them popping up too. So welcome everybody. First thing up here is our agenda review. We added a bunch of stuff or 4 resolutions to the consent agenda based on our work session. So that's changed. Thank you for highlighting that. That's changed since the agenda went out. Is there anything else we need to add, delete, change about this agenda here?
I can't see it, but I don't know if you know about why I'm here.
Yes, I heard you're going to be here, and we're going to give you some time under public comment, and we're going to let you talk to us about that for 3 minutes or so under public comment. So thanks, Gary.
I come under miscellaneous.
Yeah, we'll put it under public comment. That's kind of our general practice here.
All right.
I'll make a motion that we accept the agenda as modified.
Okay, it's been moved by Doug to accept the modified agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by David. So we will do a vote for the agenda. Doug?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Helen?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. So we've approved our agenda. So that means the first thing up, or the next thing up here, is a really long consent agenda. And I'm not going to go through all of it here because it's too long. But it's a lot of the normal stuff we always approve, minutes and financial reports, some contracts, and then the resolutions we just put on there as well. So and we've all had a chance to look at this. So is there a motion on our consent agenda tonight?
A motion to approve the consent agenda.
Moved by David. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Doug. And so a vote on the consent agenda. David?
Aye.
Doug?
Aye.
Helen?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. So we have approved our consent agenda. That takes us to public comment. This is the point at which anybody can address the board for up to 3 minutes or so on an issue that's of concern to them and maybe of concern to the district. And it's been a long time since we've actually had public comment, but we actually have some public comment tonight. So thank you for being here, Gary. Sure. And why don't you tell us what brings you in tonight?
Well, I've got good news.
All right.
I think I've found your.
Oh, sorry. Did you have a question, Doug?
Could you introduce yourself, please?
Okay,
So
Gary
for the
Klein.
record, and we've not met, so.
Okay, yeah, I'm Gary Klein.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I think I've found your demonstration farm.
Okay. Continue. Tell us more.
All right. It's on Case Road down towards Rochester. It's approximately 100 acres, probably something like 70% timber. large open pasture land, hay land. It's got a large barn that needs repairs, several other buildings, lots of farm equipment, so forth. It's owned by a woman named Janice Erickson. It is a heritage farm, and it's reaching the point where she was telling me that she and her daughter, who's actually also legally an owner, were thinking of selling the property so that Janice could move into town and be in an apartment, have all of that off of her shoulders. So that kind of shook me up, and I said, I can think of some possible ways that you can keep it, you know. And so I came up with this idea of a environmental education center, very similar to what you've been talking about. I had a meeting yesterday with the two of them, and they're enthusiastic about it. And we might be able to make a good deal here. I don't know what you'd do about office space if you're looking for office space, possibly in Rochester.
Yeah.
But it's a beautiful farm. Be a shame to see it, you know, become a housing development or something like that. So I've been gathering facts and putting together what amounts to, I guess, a synopsis or a prospectus, trying to identify the good features of the place and my ideas and theirs about how it could become a learning center. And that would be a partial means of raising funds to pay for things like property tax and so forth. And there's various programs that could result in reductions in things like taxes, and if they were to upgrade. One of them being on that barn, there's a state program that makes money available on a matching basis for repairing barns that need repair. That sort of thing. And I was in earlier talking to Sophia here, and give me a moment, what's her name?
Kendall.
Kendall. So I'm pretty impressed with her. And it looks to me like, you know, our best prospects are to go with something with the conservation district, and want to get one of your technicians, advisors, whatever, to come out and look at the whole thing and help come up with a plan for it all. So that's why I'm here. And
Well, and thank you for being here, and your timing is impeccable, because we are just finishing up our consultant study that we've been working on for a number of months now, trying to figure out what we need, where it might be located, how much it might cost, et cetera. So we're becoming better and better positioned to start to look at real pieces of property and know whether or not they work for our needs or not. And you'll, in a few minutes, we'll talk about that, the bulk of this meeting. So thank you for bringing it to our attention. And I think maybe the presentation tonight will help you understand sort of where the district is at, and then we'll kind of see what happens after that.
so have you identified any other possibilities?
We haven't looked at any specific sites yet. We've been looking at some straw man sites to help us figure out like what the issues are and what the range of costs might be for the kinds of things that we need. Not just looking at land, but as you mentioned, we do need office space, we need space to house equipment. We have a whole range of things which we'll talk about in the report. So I'm gonna, I guess, put that on hold for now. We'll have the report here later, and then we'll kind of see where things stand after that, and where the board wants to go next with this too. So
For sure, thanks for thinking of it.
absolutely.
Well, yeah.
Because one thing we've learned through this process is there isn't the ideal space out there probably, and it's all gonna be a lot more expensive and take a lot longer than we thought it was. But it's the direction we're moving, so.
I think you could probably get onto this pretty cheaply.
That's only one part of the puzzle, though, as you'll
Yeah.
see here.
But,
But thank you.
make it somewhat enticing.
Yeah, thank you. I don't see anybody else out there for public comment. Is there anybody else that wants to address the board on an issue of concern tonight? Okay, then I will close public comment, and we'll move on to partner reports. First up is NRCS. I do not think we have an NRCS rep here. Sarah, is there anything on that front that you want to note?
Nope, no update this month.
Okay. All right, then we'll move on to Department of Ecology, and Travis is with us tonight. Hello, Travis.
Hello, everyone.
Floor is yours.
All right. Well, not a lot going on my end in terms of in Thurston County. No new ERTs that have come in, but we do have 2 new team members coming on September 11th. So we're repairing our capacity and going to be fully staffed soon, I hope. And that's really all I've got.
Any questions or comments for Travis?
I really like the brevity. That's nice. Thank you.
I like the fact that you're getting new staff people.
Yeah.
That's been in the works for a while, so that's good to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Thank you for being here, Travis.
Thank you.
We'll move on to the State Conservation Commission then. And Jean, hello.
Hello, everybody. How are you doing? Am I coming through okay for sound?
You're doing great.
Excellent.
Welcome.
It's good to hear. So before I start, was anybody from your staff on a call this afternoon having to do with CREP? I can give a little download, but I don't want to waste your time if you've already had one.
We have not, as a board, had a download. Sarah, were you there?
I was not there. I was on a tour of Vicky's campus, but I do think we did have a staff person there. This has been a hot topic.
Okay.
And it may or may not be one that our board is interested in. It's about our CREP program.
Shall I give just a very brief, So FSA, who, as you know, is the federal parent agency of the CREP program. This is a riparian buffer sort of rental of land program from the federal government, has recently sort of changed the way they are looking at, or is revisiting the way they're looking at eligibility in a number of categories, and is causing them to go through existing contracts throughout the state and see which ones are in alignment with their current understanding and which ones are not. This is a fairly significant impact in Whatcom County and may be an impact elsewhere. There was a piece in the Capitol Press you may have seen. Just know that conversations are ongoing. If you have questions, you can reach out to me. I'll tell you what I know. Brian knows more, Brian Cochran over at the commission, but you may see a review of your CREP contracts, and some of them may be found ineligible. That's the bottom line. So why is because somebody appealed a decision to the DC office, and they said, not only are you wrong about that one, but here, let me look under the hood, and here are 5 or 6 other things that don't look quite right, to simplify. So the type of eligibility issues are everything from the classification of stream not being proper to the width of buffer not being proper. It seems to run the gamut. Frank Corey up at Whatcom is probably the person, other than Brian, most familiar with this situation. So just a heads up for you there. Was there a question I didn't hear?
I think Sarah put another question up here.
Yeah, we are looking at what possibilities there might be around that. It's moving rather quickly, which is a little bit concerning for us, but I think FSA is looking at the end of the federal fiscal year and worried about continuation of the Farm Bill. I'm not close enough to know if that's a realistic thing to worry about. So people are looking at lots of options, including, is there a match with the new riparian money, which would come on board maybe, early in the next calendar year, to see if there's a potential match there. And other avenues are being explored as well. There may be federal programs that are a match for some of these folks that could be shifted over. That's one of the things John Weiss, FSA lead for Washington, emphasized early on, is that was what he was looking at first, to see if there was another place in the federal system that would take some of these contracts. Yeah, so Whatcom's got, I think, half the ones in the state or something like that. So that's the lion's share by far. So there's that. The other thing I wanted to mention to you, especially if you're coming to the September board meeting, there's an item on the agenda that I wanted to give you a little bit of context around, since I have the opportunity here. Are you familiar at all with the HEAL Act? This is an environmental justice law that was passed in Washington a couple of years back. The act wrote 7 agencies into it at inception, and then as agencies are awarded certain pots of money, for example, from the Climate Commitment Fund, there are obligations under the HEAL Act that then sort of come with that funding. And the commission was awarded a number of sort of pots that we got in the last legislative session with these kinds of strings. One of the strings is that we develop a community engagement plan. So what we've done is, rather than sort of halt awarding the funds until we work with districts to build a fabulous community engagement plan, we are instead adopting a provisional community engagement plan as a starting point for that sort of customization and development. We're utilizing a template that was provided by the Environmental Justice Council that is not designed for the work that districts do. You'll see it and probably come to a similar conclusion. There's lots of good information in there. There's lots of sort of good sort of expert sort of ways of thinking about community engagement that I think are worth sort of learning from and being inspired by. But as it sits as a template, it seems more designed for sort of large, potentially damaging projects like a highway realignment, that kind of thing, how one would do community engagement in that kind of situation. And of course, our projects are largely benign, right? We don't do highway realignments and trash incinerators and such. So it's not a natural fit. Rather than work with districts to build something that is a good fit and delay the funding while we wait, we're taking this 2-step approach, asking the commissioners to adopt it as provisional, as a reference document, as sort of something to learn from, as a starting point for developing something that is a good fit to the work that the commission funds. Knowing that community engagement for our work happens at districts, right? We don't do very much of that from Olympia, if any. It's mostly at districts and sometimes through other partners that community engagement happens. So just a little bit of context on that, in case you picked up the document and said, what is this? that's a little bit of context there. Let me look at Sarah's additional requirements. Yeah, so there's a lot of process ambiguity around this, Sarah. And it's always a little bit, one never knows quite how hard to push for clarity sometimes in the face of ambiguity. This is a new process. What we know for sure is that we need to do a community engagement plan. That much is clear, and it needs to be adopted at least as provisional. Many of the 7 agencies initially named in the Act adopted a provisional plan very much as we are doing here. So we think there's good precedent for that. I don't feel like that's a particularly risky way to go. And we are certain that we need the community engagement plan in order to move forward with this funding. Some of the pots have additional restrictions or requirements built into either the proviso language or the legislation. The riparian is one of them. It has a lot of additional process steps that we know about. It's still a little unclear which other provisions of the HEAL Act apply to agencies in our position, not in the original 7, but coming in later. that's still kind of unknown. This is all new. Nobody's done this before. And so we're finding out as we go. But the one that we know for sure is the community engagement plan. So we're starting there. And we want to try to release, at the very least, the community wildfire engagement. I can never get the name right. That one, as quickly as possible, right? There's smoke in the air. I think there's every argument that there's urgency there. So that one, we are very, very hopeful that we will be allowed to release those funds once we have this plan, assuming the commissioners agree to adopt it at the September meeting. Are there questions or?
So the provisional plan would be accepted in September. Is there some sort of broad thinking about when something would be more permanently put in place, and then the process of collaborating with districts to develop that?
Yeah, so we have some initial thoughts about that, but we want to hear from districts. In my head, I think it would take about a year. People are busy to work with all of the community engagement experts out in district land. We have an idea to try, I think we've asked for permission. I'm not sure if we've heard back yet. We initially thought we would have a consultant do the plan for us, and we got $250,000 to do that. Our thought was, let's use that money and do maybe a small grants program, or pay district staff for their time as they engage with us on this process. Right, that money has a time limit on it, but it would be a start. Right, we could gather some information about what are the barriers districts are facing as they try to do community engagement. What are needs that you have? How can we collectively, broaden and deepen our community engagement? Do we need consultant expertise? Do we need funding to pay people for their time, for childcare, for what is it? What kinds of things would be helpful? And then, work with the expertise that we have, not just in districts, but in other partnerships that are key to our work. And it could be that the Environmental Justice Council wants to join in this process. There could be others, tribes might be interested. There's any number of other folks who might want to join us in this work. And see how we go from there. But the idea of using that money, if we're allowed to help support districts to engage with us in this work, is sort of the first thought we've had about moving forward.
Thank you. Other questions for Jean? Sounds like that's a no. Thanks for being here, Jean. It's good to see you. It's been a few months. Yeah. So we'll move on to the next partner reports, which Doug, WACD and NACD.
Okay, I'm still stuck on Jean saying a few months back that, she didn't show up because everything was going right. Is there something wrong we need to know about?
I'm supposed to come every quarter, even if everything's perfect.
So she's doing the bare minimum to keep her job in check.
Right.
Well,
Plus I miss you guys.
It's good to see you. For WACD, not a lot going on now. Both Tom and Ryan have been on vacations now and then. Ryan's on now. He's trying to tour Major League Baseball parks. He's going to Fenway this week, I think, which I told him he'd have fun there because the seats are really small. So there's planning for the annual meeting going on. That's going to be in November, the last week of November in Wenatchee, same place as last year. WACD has hired Heather Went, formerly with the Benton Franklin districts, to do fundraising and district engagement and that sort of thing. I've worked with Heather quite a bit on a whole bunch of stuff, and she is just great. So I'm looking forward to great things happening there. For me, the biggest thing that's been going on is NACD, the Southwest region, Pacific region joint meeting was held in South Lake Tahoe, California, which I pointed out, Southwest is the host, but California is really in the Pacific region, so what's the deal here? On the 23rd through the 25th of August, that was just last week. So I'll quickly give you a synopsis of what happened there. There were two things that really struck me that I really liked. One was they gave an overview of the Tahoe Basin, kind of the population, the water quality issues, the tributary issues going into the lake, what they were trying to do in a big picture. So I thought that was good. And the other thing was they actually had disposable bamboo plates as opposed to plastic stuff, which I thought that was really good. Before I forget, NACD has hired a grants administrator too. This is just news, fresh news. A lady named Chessa Fromm, Chessa Frahm, so I could be messing up the name. She's got a CD background. And I'm not sure exactly with grants what she'll be doing. I'm assuming the TA grants and the new generation leadership institute grants and those sorts of things. But that'll be fleshed out, I think. So anyway, back to the Lake Tahoe stuff. So they gave an overview, talked about forest health, remote sensing, and how to use that as a tool for looking at forest health and rangeland health. They're really concerned in the southwest region about pinyon juniper using all the water, which shouldn't be anything new. People have known that for 100 years. The second day was a series of tours. The first was at Sierra Echo Summit, which was 7,000 feet, and for us flatlanders from 50 feet above sea level, you could really tell the difference. We hiked up about a third of a mile up to this ridge to look over the other side where it had been burned with the Caldor fire. And several of us could tell the difference in the elevation. And basically what they're doing there is taking out fire damaged logs via Chinook helicopters. So I was really glad to see them salvaging what they could. The second stop was discussed fire breaks, fuel breaks, community engagement on how to get people working with you as state agency or a local fire agency. We had lunch at a California Civilian Conservation Corps camp where they talked about fire and land management approaches within that basin, kind of another bigger picture. They talked about engage, educate, and empower. I like slogans like that. I think they're easier to keep in mind. They talked about beaver dam and analogs, which I thought it just imitating the beavers. They basically said, yeah. The last one was really interesting to me. It was the main road in Carson City, Nevada. I don't remember the name of it, but it's a main road. It's be like Interstate 5. And then there's a highway that goes up to Tahoe, big intersection. And right at that intersection, there's a thing called the Tahoe Forest Products Sawmill, which is on tribal land. The permitting and environmental things were more understandable from the tribal perspective as far as accommodating what the sawmill wanted to do. They're taking the burned timber and stockpiling it now while they're building the mill. And there's a couple of really cool things about that. A whole bunch of jobs are created. They're using this timber that's going to degenerate and be useless in about 3 or 4 years. And then the tribe has set up a program where they use the coal logs to provide firewood in the winter for tribal elders, not just the Washoe tribe, but the other tribes in the vicinity. I thought that was really pretty cool. And all of these put together, the main thing that they're trying to do is keep the clarity of Lake Tahoe clear, which I thought it was good to just make a summary of that. It ended up that I gave 2 presentations. I didn't know I was going to do that last week at this time, but that seemed to go okay. I think it was worthwhile to go to. I think we could have been better organized, and I think we could have done it quicker, but that's Doug talking about the WACD. But I thought it was worthwhile. That's it.
Questions for Doug?
I've got a question. Did the subject of biochar making ever come up?
Oh, yeah.
Good. That's what we need.
All right, thank you, Doug. And that concludes partner reports. Next up is the CEC. I don't see Heartland on the meeting. Oh, they are. I don't see it on my participants, but great if that's the case.
James is here, James Stanton.
Yep.
It's weird. It's not showing up on my participant list. But we're very glad you're here, James. And Doug, we're very glad you're both here. I know we were running a little early here, so if it's okay with you, we're just going to jump right into the presentation if you're ready to go.
Yeah. Let's see. Now I need to figure out every time it feels like a new time to figure out how to show your screen. Let's see. I don't choose.
There should be a green button with a little arrow in the bottom center.
Yeah, no, it's more on my side. Sorry, I'm just trying to figure. When you do the projection mode, then you lose all your other windows. So let's see. All right.
Here we go.
Does that work? You guys there?
Yes.
Okay. Can you see the screen? There you are. You're over here. Okay. Great. So thank you all for having us back. It's been a fun summer kind of working on this project and through multiple different reports and iterations. And this is kind of the final presentation to you all. And we're discussing kind of the acquisition ownership and kind of some of the building construction elements that we kind of been building towards through this entire process. Let's see. So as a kind of review of what we've talked about, what you've asked us to do at the beginning of the project and what we've talked about previously. Previously, we talked about what would be suitable properties, and that we engaged with MFA and company to identify several different properties. And this report, we're going to talk about some of the long-term owning versus leasing, build versus renovate questions, and potentially a budget and financial strategies to address those and make it possible. So we're going to talk about costs of different building styles, some facility pricing based on some selected sites that we worked with the team at TCD to select. Additionally, some economics of ground lease and purchase, kind of how that works. And additionally, any kind of takeaways and next steps that we suggest and any questions. So as we delve into building styles and materials, first I just want to talk about kind of 3 different layers of costs that we deal with when talking about cost of a facility. Overall, there's a land cost, and additionally, for that land, then there's site costs that are required to make that land suitable for buildings, so septic, sewer, parking lots, internal roads, etc. And then there's soft costs associated with that, design consultants, site permitting, etc., financing. And then there's building costs, which is then you've got your land, you've prepped your site, and then you're putting your building on top of that. And that is core and shell. That's your TIs or tenant improvements, kind of the interior, some of the interior stuff, and then fixtures and finishes and equipment, which is sometimes called FF&E. And additionally, then there's soft costs, which are then the work that's required to kind of set that work, all the building up. So architects, again, site planners, financing, etc. So there's kind of 3 different buckets of costs that we're going to talk about. And as we look at some comparative groups, and just a quick note too, soft costs are typically about 30 to 35% of your total hard costs. And that hard cost is really determined by what you're actually building and what kind of structures you're working with. So as we look at kind of comparison materials in this the next couple of slides, we're strictly talking about building cost. Does not include land cost, does not include your site costs. We're strictly talking about your building costs, hard costs, plus your soft costs associated with it. So what we did is we worked with DCW, which is the cost estimation group that was in our proposal and who's doing a lot of the other cost estimations we'll talk about. And we reviewed conservation sites that we talked about in our comparison report. So Spokane, Beaver Creek, et cetera, and asked them kind of what was this building cost. And so you guys are familiar with those sites. We've really delved into what those sites look like and those buildings look like. And so we just wanted to kind of get some familiar anchors for what building costs appear. So the Beaver Creek, DCW estimated the cost per square foot would be approximately $850 to $1,150. This is wood frame construction, basic fit and finish, glued carpet patches, shingling siding. So they estimate that, yeah, it would probably be around, the $1,000 range per square foot for this type of facility in the current market. I know we talked about previously some of the costs, and you may want to review the report that we looked at that we gave you previously. And those were for the prices, and they mentioned prices. That price was for what the groups paid when they built it. Since then, costs have escalated significantly during COVID and other time and inflation pressures as well. So you might be a little surprised at some of the costs, but these are derived from what we've talked about, and DCW is very embedded in the building community. They do this all the time, so they produce very good numbers. Another kind of different construction option is what was at the Spokane Conservation District. So this is a metal frame construction, polished concrete flooring, treated wood interior, commercial grade windows. And this comes to about $1,350 to $1,500 per square foot for the building. That's hard and soft costs included. The Rainier Beach, this is a little cheaper. This is a little wood siding, concrete floor, polycarbonate awning, wood trusses. So as we it's a little cheaper construction here. And lastly, here we go. So the Frick, so this is a full living building challenge building, very nice materials, fit and finish, metal and wood construction, high-end windows, insulation, other finishes, specialty high-end equipment and systems, about $1,500 to $1,900 per square foot for the building.
Can I ask questions?
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I got a question. This is Doug. That's in Pittsburgh. Are there differences in the construction cost in Pittsburgh and from the Puget Sound Trough?
There are differences in construction costs. I wouldn't say there's significant differences in this type of construction. One thing they did mention in Pittsburgh was there were few vendors to provide this type of building. I think we would. There are very few living buildings in the Puget Sound area. So I think we'd run into some of the same kind of vendor constraint issues. But I think most of those cost differences would be around the margin. And they were estimating if you were to build this building in Pittsburgh, to build this building in the location that we're looking at in Thurston County. So this is not DCW estimating for Pittsburgh. This is DCW estimating for the South Puget Sound area.
Based on Pittsburgh, though. Yeah.
Based on this type of construction.
Yeah. Thank you.
They didn't have access to any of the metrics or costs or anything that we showed you in the previous presentation.
Okay.
Other questions?
I think you can go on.
Okay, great. As we talk about total project costs, I just want to give a little bit of overview of kind of how the development process could work and where costs could come. So what we're going to be presenting to you is the all-in rolled up costs of this entire timeline. The way that a group would experience cost is much different and spread out over that timeline. So just wanted to talk about that a little bit. Ideally we would attain site control And site control can be, hey, we have a purchase and sale agreement in place, but we won't close on the land, as we've seen here, until we have all our due diligence, planning, site design, entitlement in place. And then we can say, great, we have all our pre-work done, we're ready to put shovels in the ground. Now let's pay you for the land and start our construction. We put 2 phases here of construction, but you could do it in 1 phase. Some feedback that we got in discussing that timing with DCW was, while the initial phase can be cheaper in 2-phase construction, the entire project can be more expensive because you are building later with escalated costs, and additionally, you're not always able to anticipate the need of your second phase. So as much, you can do a lot of pre-planning, but sometimes that doesn't quite meet all the requirements for that second phase, which then you'll incur additional cost. So again, something to think about as you're looking in these, how you're planning your construction and facility going forward.
James, just a quick question there. I mean, is that a pretty typical time horizon for a project like this, that you'd be looking at basically 5 years from site acquisition to when you can actually move some people in under phase 1 construction?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really depends on, the site design, entitlement, and due diligence and planning periods. And for example, in Seattle, that can take many, many years. In Thurston County, that can probably be reduced. And additionally, as the Beaver Creek team talked about, engaging the community can probably speed that up, because you'll reduce the amount of pushback you'll get for, increased traffic, or, whatever other changes happen to that impact the neighbors. Site design and entitlement, again, it just depends on the local public process. In Seattle, that can take 2 years plus. Other places, it can take probably a year. Doug, do you have any comments on timing on that?
Yeah, I agree with that. I'd say let's maybe put a little less emphasis on site search and obtain control and DD and planning, but fixate on the site design and entitlement and the construction boxes. And we might achieve some time savings depending on a speedy jurisdiction and a simplified construction typology, but that 3-year period is a good conservative estimate for the kind of building that you're contemplating, and maybe we could shave 6 or 8 months off that.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so the process that we followed in pricing different sites is, from the sites that we talked about in our previous meeting, we worked with the TCD team to select 3 strawman sites. Together, the TCD team created the building, kind of an outline of what the site would support in terms of buildings, demonstration areas, etc. And we can delve into that a little bit. We then took those requirements and worked with DCW to estimate the cost of building those new based off of the site, and additionally renovating existing buildings on site. And then additionally, Heartland worked on the cost estimation of the land as well to buy the site. I'm not paying attention to the chat, so if you're dropping chat in here, you have not been.
I'll monitor the chat, James. Don't worry about it.
All right. So the 3 sites that we picked, or that we worked with the team to pick, one was in the UGA, Site B, between Olympia and Lacey. Site A, and Site A and C were outside the UGA. That there were differences in access to utilities based on it being inside and outside the UGA, and additionally differences in building quality and size on the sites, and that will be reflected in the pricing that you'll see. The priced programming. So programming in real estate, we talk about programming as what's on the building site. So if you hear us say, "Oh, the programming is this" or "the programming is that," we're not referring to the classes and other things that are being run on in the buildings, but actually the buildings themselves. So we looked at buildings, roadways, mechanical on site, site electrical, demonstration areas, plantings, site FF&E, and as well as site preparation. A couple notes. We looked at LEED Platinum buildings. That adds about 11% to the cost of the building. So that's kind of a good rule of thumb there. We did not look at hazardous waste remediation on the site. So because we're unaware of what was on the site. That all sites had power lines adjacent. So we didn't need to look at long power line runs. And additionally, all the sites that did not have sewer adjacencies and water adjacencies were outside the UGA, so they could be served by septic or well. We did work with DCW to determine a per linear foot for water mains and sewer mains, as well as electrical extensions. And those are approximately $200 a square foot for water and sewer, and about $60 a linear foot for electrical. So if those requirements change, those could be accounted for.
Under electrical, I don't see broadband is where I'm gonna go.
Yes. So we did not. We can look at broadband, but this was not. We did not estimate the cost of broadband. That's something we can go back to and get a number for.
Thank you.
Site A, about 12 acres, residential zoning, not in the UGA, approximately 6,000 square feet of buildings, well served, which costs about $550,000, and sanitary sewer, which about $150,000. And power lines were not adjacent to the site. So here is a summary of all the costs for the project. New buildings, estimated cost approximately $31.6 million. Renovated buildings, estimated cost about $24 million. This is for about approximately 22,500 square feet of building, as well as a lot of kind of demonstration areas, etc. This is in line. If you look at the building cost per square foot, $1,100 to $1,200 for the new. And I don't know if you can see my mouse. Whoops. Here, and then with existing structures, about $430 all in to renovate. But this was benefited from a lot of existing structures there already.
This is Doug again. Can I ask another question?
Sure.
Regarding the output of the well, I don't know that we know how much the well puts out in, the volume of water. And I'm not sure we've decided exactly what it is we would need.
Yes.
So there may be well drilling costs there too.
Yeah, so this does have a cost to drill a well as part of this process. And then estimated all in was about $500,000, but that price could change depending on what the requirements were for the throughput of the well, as well as the depth that water is available. In the grand scale, that's $500,000 within a $24 to $31 million project, and that change could be tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands. So we're just giving. There's a lot of unknowns here, but I think the big thing to take away is just the size of the project and the magnitude of the pricing involved.
Okay, thank you.
And I don't want to get too nitpicky on the well question, but is the assumption here that it's an exempt well and not a water right, a well with rights? Because we can't really get those anymore. So I assume they're looking at exempt well, which then has a limit of, I think, 5,000 gallons a day.
An exempt well is a water right, but
Well,
it's got a priority date.
yeah, it's different than an adjudicated water right for sure. But yeah, okay. So that would be my assumption is that we're not getting, we're not getting a water right.
Well, we can figure out, what the other wells in the area, how deep they are.
Yeah.
But what I was concerned about is, okay, if we've got this much water coming in, but our demand is gonna be this with our
Yeah.
staff and visitors, we
Yeah.
need to have those.
You're still limited to 5,000 gallons a day from an exempt well.
There's ways to deal with that.
Okay, sorry, I didn't want to get too hung up on that.
Oh.
You can move on, James.
Thanks.
No, these are all things that need to be worked out, and you guys are doing a great job of thinking through every single little detail. And it's really good because some people get into the process and then they go, oh my gosh, there's all these details. So it's good to think about the details first. Next site, approximately 12.6 acres, zoned for mixed use residential. I guess one thing to call back to here is we estimated the land pricing to be about $850,000 for 12 acres at about $70,000 per acre. That's outside the UGA. You'll see a little bit price difference in this one because it is in the UGA. It is zoned mixed residential, so the value to other builders will be higher. And additionally, it's closer to utilities, etc. So the water and sewer hookup is in this kind of northwest corner here. And so your line from your middle of the site, that's where we estimated all costs from, is about $250,000, and sewer is about $240,000. And your power line is adjacent to the site as well. So on this site, we estimated the land value at about $130,000 per acre. So it increases the purchase cost to $6.1 million. But then you'll see that the building costs are, within the same range. And so then the end costs are also within the same range, about $32 million to $24 million. Lastly, site C, 19.5 acres. There's 2 large hangars on the site. So the space for the renovated properties will be larger. So that's why that price will come up. There weren't a lot of buildings on site. There's only about a 500 square, or another additional buildings on site, about a 500 square foot little office here. But you'll see land is cheaper, not in the UGA, $40,000 per acre, but most of the costs are consistent, about 32.7. The renovated cost is higher because you actually have 2 17,500 square foot buildings. So that's more than the 22,000 square feet were estimated in the new building case. So on the renovated buildings, you'll have more space, but more cost. All right, before we move on to kind of how ground leasing versus purchasing works, does anybody have any questions? No? Okay.
I don't think so. Go ahead.
Okay. So we were asked directly kind of the difference between ground lease and purchase, and kind of how that works would work for the conservation district. Typically, a ground lease, you pay the owner a certain yield on the land. So you develop a cost of a value for the land. You pay a certain yield. In this case, we'll call it 7%. So 7% of the value to the owner every year. And then additionally, that value can increase. So you could have a locked-in increase of say 3% per year of how much you're paying them. And additionally, typically every 25 years or so, depending on how the contract is, you'll get an appraisal of the land, and that value will adjust to whatever the new value of the land is. So you have some sort of locked-in stepwise increase or smooth increase, and then you'll reappraise, and then you'll have to pay them a new the 7% yield on then that new value of land. At the end of the lease term, you return everything to the leaser. That includes the buildings you have on site. So as you're thinking about long-term ownership, that's something to think about. Some opportunities there: lower upfront costs. You just have to pay your initial yield, that 7% in this case. But challenges are the costs grow over time. You have to give back the land, and it's, especially in rural areas, it's hard to find a ground lease if that's appealing to you. Purchase, I think a lot of you are familiar with how that works. There's you get control of the land, and then typically you put a loan on that land with a interest rate, duration, and amortizing period, basically amount of time where the loan goes to zero. Opportunity or challenges there is typically higher upfront costs, but the opportunities are that there's a fixed payment, allows owners to participate in land appreciation, and you really just own the land. Challenges are it's a higher upfront cost, and you have to find a lender that understands what you guys want to do as an organization, and understand how the economics of your organization work. So by way of an example, we chose a $1.2 million property and ran it through both scenarios: a ground lease scenario and a 50% loan to value loan scenario. On the right, you'll see a graph of the first 30 years of ownership, kind of what money goes out. You see on the orange line, there's a big number, 600,000 at the beginning, but then your costs go much lower and stay steady over the next 30 years. And at the end of the 30 years, we've chosen a 30-year amortization. You own the property outright. In the ground lease scenario, your initial cost is zero, but you have a growing kind of blue line here that increases as time goes on. And if you look at the projected payments, you'll see that year one for the ground lease is $84,000. Year one on the loan is $43,000. But looking at year 30, you have projected payment of $243,000 versus that same $43,000 payment for year 30. And then we can I say probably everybody's going to year 99 and looking at that. And this is kind of how those two curves diverge significantly over the course of 99 years. I'm not saying it will happen this way, but you do see at 30 years that loan payment go to zero because you've paid off your loan, but the annual ground lease payment kind of escalates like a ski jump. So just something to know about that. I guess if you're looking for a recommendation, that if you do have the ability to pay money up front for a site and you're looking at using the site 100 years, long-term ownership, stewardship, etc., you may set yourself up better if you are able to get a land loan. But additionally, as you're looking at overall cost, we estimated 1.2 million in this scenario for land. We saw land prices between 800,000 and 1.6 million on a total project cost of 32 million. So, this ground lease versus purchase decision is a very small part of your overall project and your overall project budget. So next steps, takeaways, depending on the utility, site cost could be between 7 and 8.5 million. Based on the exemplar programming, you're probably looking at 22.5 million for those building costs, and then together for new structures. For renovated structures, it really depends on what's there. We threw some numbers at it, but I think once you get your site and your structures, that you really want to look at what's required to renovate those. Together, that 7 to 8.5 plus your 22, that will be your overall project cost plus your cost of land, which is between 1.6 and 800,000 for the strawman sites. And then ground lease, as we talked about, can reduce your upfront costs but increase your long-term ownership costs. Yeah, and so next steps, Doug, do you want to talk about next steps as TCD kind of goes through this process?
Well, yeah, I guess I don't know if you have any initial reaction to this budget range. If it's kind of what you're expecting, that's great. If it's a surprise, then a natural next step would be to give some more thought to what that initial program is and what you really need now versus something that could wait till later as a way to value engineer the program and right size those costs. And there may be some additional consultants that you would want to bring on to help with that in terms of design expertise, eventually construction management capabilities. Those are all disciplines that we interact with on a frequent basis. So we can certainly offer some recommendations. Interestingly, coming out of this, one of the bigger findings for us, since we're Heartland and we focus on land, is like the land is, as James said, you've got to find a site, but not really that big a driver in terms of the overall cost equation. And I think I would add to that this consideration between a ground lease and a fee simple acquisition. The buyers or the tenants don't ever hardly really want to do a ground lease. So you're only willing to do that because it gets you a site you couldn't otherwise get. The presumption generally is that I know the Port of Olympia does ground leases, but it's probably not super common down in this area outside of them. So there's probably quite a few opportunities that would be available just from a purchase perspective, and it probably makes sense to isolate your thinking to that as a land control strategy. I think as part of that, there's, in the realm of this budget, and if it needs to be adapted, is to give some more consideration to what financing strategies may be out there outside of just a conventional look as the way that we modeled it, at least on the land side of things. And I know that one of the sub-consultants, Mal Foster, had offered a few ideas there. Unfortunately, they didn't make it into this presentation because I think we received those after we had already committed deadline-wise to get this over to you. I guess with that, we would like to open it up to further Q&A and kind of talk about where you'd like to take this next.
Doug, just a clarification, you said that some stuff came in that didn't make it in time to be in this presentation, but it will be in the final report that you present?
These are the financing strategies, kind of alternative funding sources that were part of what our sub-consultant Mal Foster was focused on. So yeah, we'll definitely include that as an exhibit in the final report.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes or so before an advertised executive session, so we're going to open it up for questions and comments. Doug had his hand up first here.
Yeah, I know it's pretty uncommon, but sometimes you see lease to own options. You lease it, and basically your rent or your lease payment goes to the principal and you pay it off that way.
Yeah, I guess we don't have a ton of experience directly with that. I mean, we see that on a land acquisition strategy, which is really just an installment sale or seller financing.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's a derivative of a conventional loan structure, but you can usually get more flexible terms from the seller. It's going to usually almost always come at a higher interest rate.
And I would think with what we're looking at for criteria, it'd be hard to find a seller that would be willing to do that.
Yeah, makes sense. Sarah,
Maybe.
your hand's up next. Oh, I'm sorry, Doug, I don't want to cut you off. Well, if you have something to say, go ahead. Sarah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, Sarah.
One comment and then a sort of next step piece. One is I did put a comment in the chat there, but as we're looking at this new structure total cost here, that's sort of our, Cadillac, all the buildings, everything that we would want to build, all the phases sort of total when we're done. And, what we talked about at TCD is this sort of phase structure. So that's not the cost to get that into this build. But to make sure that was clear. And the other thing that I wanted to share is because we are limited on discussion time for the board, that if you want to send any and all questions that you have for our consultants or things you want to make sure are in that final report, please send those to Susan. She'll aggregate all of that stuff and get it all over to our consultant. So just I wanted to offer that if you think of something after this meeting, definitely don't hesitate to send that over to Susan and she can funnel that.
And Sarah, just because we work better with timelines, when should we have those comments to Susan so that we can stay on track with the final report?
I would say ASAP.
Okay.
Yeah, we're trying to meet that August 31st deadline for the final report.
That's why I asked. So if you have comments, get them to Susan by tomorrow morning.
I would just let me offer one maybe kind of non sequitur comment that I meant to say earlier, which is because the land is a pretty small component of the overall cost, the notion of being offered free land was, seemingly enticing, but you should be pretty careful about that. It's great if it meets all your other criteria and it's can accommodate the program and can solve for the utility challenges, but it may be a very expensive gift, if you will, if it doesn't do those things.
Yeah, thanks for the reminder.
Yeah. Let's see, David. Helen, your hand's up next. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was just kind of intrigued by a little comment in the report about Beaver Creek and their way of strategizing that I'd like you to elaborate on, where they were thinking about the future use of the land around the property. This would be for sort of property B in the strawman examples, I imagine would be the most germane, but can you explain that a little bit, like how they thought about that they were going to get basically urbanized around and how that fit into their thinking?
Yeah, it was both a strategy for Spokane and Beaver Creek, is they were very intentional about their site selection to be in the path of growth and additionally in the kind of nexus of transportation. So I think that's also in the Spokane, you're between Spokane Valley and Spokane. And their thinking was, hey, we're building this nice facility to conserve and to kind of have all these kind of rural demonstration, et cetera. It'd be a great to, have this for future generations when everything else is homes or office buildings or something else, to have a great place for people to see things they wouldn't normally see, and for people to come who say are kind of city locked or don't get to travel out to rural areas as much. So they I think both of them spent a lot of time driving around the area they serve, and literally, I think both of them as well saw for sale sign and picked up the phone and called the broker. So it was really born out of knowing the area, thinking 50 years in the future and saying, where are things going to be, what's happening, and then kind of serendipitously, but it's really, they did a lot of homework to get that opportunity to pick up the phone and find a good site. Additionally, actually both those as well weren't the first offer on the site. They were both second offers and built a relationship with the owners to kind of share their vision of the site with the owners. So that's something else that they both had in common.
David, do you have anything?
No, I don't have anything right now. I can email if needed.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Sarah, Helen, Doug, any final thing here as we're wrapping up? No? Okay, well, I think just on behalf of TCD and the board, I would just want to express our appreciation to both you, James, and Doug. This has been a really great process, I think, from our standpoint. I feel like it's really met the needs that we were looking to meet through this process, and very much appreciate the detail in all your presentations and your flexibility and kind of the iterative process when we've thrown things out there that you've gone back and thought about them and kind of reflected on them and brought them back into the next piece. So I think we're very happy that we've been able to work with Heartland and you folks on this thing, and really pleased to be getting the final report here in a few days. So just thank you so much to you and the whole team for your effort.
Well, it's great being working with you guys. So feeling is mutual.
All right. Well, with that, we will conclude that topic. We got about 2 minutes here to shift to an executive session.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Good evening.
So here we are. The final topic on our agenda tonight is an executive session to consider the selection of a site or the acquisition of real estate. And this is, sorry, Doug, we skipped something. You're pointing it out. Thank you. We're going to quickly look, item 7, governance, at next month's agenda. If we can get that popped up here first. I was just getting ahead of myself there.
Sophia, are you pulling that up?
Oh, sure.
I can if that's easier.
I got it.
Okay, there we go. September 26th, the next work session and board meeting. Let me scroll down there so we can see it, Sophia. Here we go. Another staff presentation, obviously more on the CEC and the new office space issue. I think we don't need to probably talk about resolutions, right? Because we dealt with all those tonight.
Yeah, I don't think we need to talk about ours other than what contact has been made with the other
Okay,
districts.
fair enough, yeah.
To push them.
So other district resolutions or strategies for talking to districts about our
Or an
resolutions.
update, I'm assuming Sarah and
Yep.
probably myself will be talking to other districts. And
Okay, that makes sense, thank you.
Okay,
Okay,
we'll make it an update.
anything else there anyone wants to add? Okay, then on the board meeting agenda, familiar items there so far, minutes, financial reports, partner reports, etc. Anything to change on that at this point, or we good with that as a draft agenda for next month?
I think we did.
Okay, I see thumbs up, happiness there. Okay, then that's what we will go with for now.
I think it was on the consent agenda.
So now we will go back to the topic I was previously talking about, which is our executive session to talk about real estate site acquisition. This is permitted under RCW 4230-110B. We will go into this executive session, which will include just the board and our executive director and our legal counsel. And we will take no action in that executive session because legally we can't take action in an executive session. But we will come out at the end of the executive session and make a report out, and then we will adjourn our meeting. So that's where we go from here. And without further ado, okay, so we just completed an executive session on the topic of real estate or site acquisition. We had a good discussion and we made no decisions, but we did provide direction to our staff based on that discussion. And that was the last item on our agenda tonight. So we are now at the point where we adjourn our meeting. So I need a motion to adjourn.
I'll move to adjourn.
Helen has moved to adjourn. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by David. So we are voting to adjourn. Helen?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Doug?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Thank you all for hanging in there. We are now adjourned. Very productive meeting, very interesting meeting. And we will hopefully see all of you next Tuesday at Urban Futures Farm for our board and staff picnic. So it's always a good time, and the weather looks to be good at this point. So we'll see you Tuesday.
Thank
Good
you.
night.